Good afternoon. What a phenomenal place to be sharing ideas. I've heard some amazing speeches, but I have to say, Tina just is the perfect speech to go before me because I want to talk to you today about caring for kids, and I want to talk to you about defining moments. You know, there's not that many moments in our life that truly define us, but one of those for me was when my firstborn, Ashlyn, was coming into this world. And I'll never forget, you know, I'd read the books and I had been the Lamaze coach, and I'm in a room full of women, probably more qualified to talk about childbirth than I am. But I want to tell you something. There's something about that, and people would tell you along the way, Lamarque, you just don't know until you're there. You can read all the books, you can do all these things you don't know. And I remember when Ashley came into this world and holding her and thinking to myself, gosh, this is what everyone meant. How is it possible that I love this little person that just came into the world? How is it possible that I feel these emotions, that I feel this love for her? You know, she's an amazing person. And along the way, things happen. And I had another one of those defining moments 8.5 years ago when I walked into a pediatrician's office with Ashlyn and we were diagnosed with autism. Notice I said we, because when you receive a diagnosis, or someone you love, whether it's your child or your mother or your brother or your nephew or whoever that might be, it affects the whole family. It affects my wife. It affected me. It affected my children. And suddenly my family is impacted by this word, this phrase, autism, and we were given this, a sheet of paper with autism at the top and a lot of grim statistics at the bottom, and the doc walked out of the room without one referral. Wow. Was that a moment? Was that a moment that changed my life forever? Took my wife and I 12 months of searching the internet late at night, trying to figure out what is autism and what resources can we access to help her condition. Like, surely we can't just take this piece of paper and give up. We can't quit. Like, there has to be something. And in fact, it took us a year to figure out that there were 12 different referrals that should have been given in 3 distinct areas, not just medical resources, but therapy resources, educational resources. How could this happen? How could I live in the age of information and not have this quickly? And I began to ask questions. At the time I was in a startup and I put it on my bucket list, Ashlyn's project. Why does diagnosis suck in America? This was a question I had. And what I began to do is I kind of forgot about the bucket list, as we all do, and I sold a company 6 years ago and I took that out. And I thought, well, somebody's done something about this. And I began to look and I couldn't find answers. And so we went out and grabbed data because that's what I believe in. And we asked 250 caregivers, all with different diagnoses. Their kids had diagnoses of some type, maybe Down syndrome, maybe Dandy-Walker syndrome, but they had something. And we asked them, what happened at diagnosis? And how many resources did you receive at that point? And then I think the most important question, in a perfect world, what would happen? And here's what we learned. We learned that there's 4 pods in what I now call the special care industry. There's early childhood, there's education, there's transition, and there's independent living. And what I figured out is that there are serious delays attached to each one of these pods. We also figured out something unbelievably fascinating. And that is that I had a ton in common with the person next to me who had a child with a completely different diagnosis. In fact, 85% of the diagnosis experience is exactly the same. And I've come to realize that being diagnosed as a patient, whether it's you or someone you love, is just like grief. It's a process. We like to think in America about acute interactions. There's a diagnosis and then there's a result. But I've found that being diagnosed is much, much more complex than that. And this is what caregivers fear in the pediatric space. They fear their own death. When I go to bed at night, I think about what's going to happen to Ashlyn after I'm gone. And when I don't have resources, when I don't have information, the stress level, as this graph shows, actually increases. This began to signal something to me. Hey, wait a second, this is wrong. A business model would never look like this. There would be a peak, and then we would access resources. There would be a solution. What is going on here? What's going on here is that the special care industry is defined today. At the center of that industry are caregivers. And the problem with that is when you're diagnosed, your child's diagnosed, suddenly, here's what happens. I became a one-issue voter in that defining moment. I became a one-issue researcher in that moment. And I can tell you right now, I have spent a lot of my life, and I will spend the rest of it, helping other families who have gone through a diagnosis experience to help them have the power to find their path of care. That's a defining moment. But this is messed up. How can we, as consumers, people affected by something, how can they be at the center of the industry? How can it be their job to fight insurance companies, to find resources? This seemed crazy to me. And I began to realize that this is the model that we need to build. I formed a nonprofit called the Connections Project, and it was invented right here in Dallas, Texas. We have 180 providers supporting free information, and what that means is we can now walk up to a caregiver, hand them every single resource in this geographical area in less than a second. We just added an app to that because I believe they deserve information, but I believe the industry should be the one giving it to you, right? Most of you have heard about senior care, but how many of you have heard about the special care industry? When I talk to legislators, and I do often, about legislation that affects kids with special needs, all of them understand that they'll care for their parents for 2 to 6 years. But almost none of them understand what it's like to be a caregiver for life. I began to see similarities. I began to see opportunity. And then I began to realize that if we built the special care industry, if I did something about this, that diagnosis would be a huge peak of stress, but as we access resources, we could actually provide a path for parents and caregivers to die knowing that their child was taken care of. But it didn't stop there. I began to get invitations to speak at Alzheimer's group, and I thought, this is an Alzheimer's support group. I wonder if they really know what I'm doing. Like, why are they inviting me to speak? And finally, I asked one of the ladies, I said, listen, I'm kind of nervous about this. I don't understand why you invited me to speak. Like, I don't know if you know this, but I help kids. And she looked at me and she goes, Lamarque, we're the same. And what she meant is the top 3 needs of caregivers, whether you're in the pediatric space or the geriatric space, or maybe you're taking care of your spouse that has a terminal illness. Your top 3 needs are information, respite, which means to take a break, to go to the grocery store, to eat something, maybe with someone else that you love, so you can vent a bit. And then funding. How are we going to pay for this care? There are all these things that were similar. And 1.5 years ago, someone looked at me and said, Lamarque, I want to ask you a question. Why are you hoarding your work for kids with special needs? I was offended. Hoarding? What are you talking about? I'm not hoarding anything. I'm helping people. She looked at me and she said, Lamarque, you're only helping these people. Why aren't you helping the world? That was a big question. And then I realized something. I know something that is not talked about often, and that is that healthcare is unbelievably personal. There is not one path of care. There are paths of care. And when we are diagnosed, our family unit, the people that surround us, those that love us, we have to choose a path of care. So let me ask you a question. If all of us in this room and all of us at the watch parties, everyone who sees this video, if we all have cancer, same stage, same disease life cycle, are we going to agree on one path of treatment? The answer is absolutely not. And I'm spending my life helping you and your family so that you can find your own path of care. See, I talk to thousands of caregivers every year. And the first thing they tell me after I speak and I'm at the table, they're lined up like I'm a rock star. It's crazy. And they come up to me and they go, Lamarque, my son, my daughter was diagnosed with this, and they will never do this. It always starts that way. And I go, you know what? I'm really glad you shared with me what your child may never do. And now let me tell you something else. That doesn't matter. What matters is, what can your child do? What can the person you're caring for do? Whether they're a geriatric patient or a pediatric patient, you have to find ability, because my responsibility to Ashlyn has nothing to do with what she will never do. It has everything to do with what she can do. I have to respond to her ability, and when I do that, good things happen, solutions happen, but you're not going to find that at a doctor's office. You're not going to find that talking to somebody. You're going to have to find information. Well, Lamarque, which way is right? Which way is wrong? I'm not sure where to go. What if I make a mistake? And I say, wait a second. Let's talk about this. There is no right and wrong. See, in my house, we believe in bringing therapy into our home. if you walk into my house and you come to the farm, you're going to experience a lot of things. And I'm going to tell you, you're going to roosters and chickens and a therapy pig and all sorts of crazy stuff that you might be like, Lamarque, what is going on? Is this a zoo? No, it's therapy for my daughter who loves two things, art and animals. But I have very good friends who would never bring therapy into their home. They feel like that's an intrusion into their home space. And let me ask you, who's right? Is it me or them? Am I wrong or are they right? No, we're both right. And what I'm concerned with is, do they have access to information? Do they understand that they invent their own path of care and that they have to find it? What's right for me may not be right for you. Love this family, right? This movie came out several years ago, a Disney movie called Meet the Robinsons. You see this family? See, when Ashlyn was diagnosed, I suddenly realized that we weren't the average family on the block. We weren't the ones that fit in, because Ashlyn does lots of weird things. And she does them all the time. She stims and she cries out. Sometimes, God forbid, she has a meltdown. And when you have an 8-year-old or now a 12-year-old having a meltdown, can I just tell you, people look at you funny. But what I loved about this movie most is this kid was at dinner, he's trying to fix a gadget, and peanut butter and jelly explodes all over the family. And he shrieks, he's waiting for them to scream at him and yell at him, and he pulls back. And guess what happens? Everybody gets quiet and they go, "You failed! You failed!" They start throwing a party and streamers come down. That's what I want you to realize as caregivers today, is that failure's not final. In fact, I would tell you it's okay to fail fast. I've failed many times, and let me tell you, plan A rarely works out when you're trying to find care. How many of you have experienced that? Boy, I have. Let me tell you something else. You can't quit, and I want to close with this story. I had spent $30,000 in a year of our lives in a therapy that was evidence-based, scientifically proven, the leading therapy for autism. There's only one problem. It wasn't working. Ashlyn was miserable. I was miserable. We would do this thing where we try to get her to stop these behaviors, because I was judging these behaviors. Don't make those noises, Ashlyn. That's weird. That's strange. God, why does she do that? It's embarrassing. My other kids were like, why does she do that? It's really annoying. I know. I'm in the same car. Right? And I made all these judgments. It wasn't working. I came home from work, and my wife looks at me and she goes, "I bought you a plane ticket today to the Sunrise Institute." And I go, "The what?" "The Sunrise Institute. And by the way, when you go, just so you know, there's no phone, there's no internet. So like, you're going to spend a week and you got to concentrate." And I'm like, oh my God, I'm running a national company. This is bad news. So I reluctantly get on the plane. I go to this place. I called it hippie camp. We had to take it was so muddy, we had to take our shoes off, and they didn't have real chairs. We had these like hippie chairs. They were sitting on the floor. It was crazy. And they did something. They began to talk to me about my emotions and how I felt towards autism and how autism's not the enemy and I need to embrace it. And I thought, this is crazy. They're talking about me. Ashlyn's the one with the problem. Then they did something insane. See, that $30,000 was spent to get her to stop this stimming behavior, and they wanted me to join it. To join it? Are you kidding? I just spent $30,000, which is a lot to me. I'm a man. I was worried about money. $30,000 is not okay. I came home and I said, "Jackie, I think I just wasted a week. I don't know what to do. These people want us to join stimming. It's nuts. But I don't know what else to do." I'd failed, right? I felt like we were failing. And Ashlyn at the time, she had the stimming behavior. She was running back and forth between the door like a chicken, and this is how that looked. And when she'd get to the front door, she would go, bing, and then she would do it over and over and over for hours. It was unbelievably enjoyable. This was one of the behaviors I wished to crush. And so I said, "This is going to look crazy, Jackie, but I don't know what else to do. I'm going to try it. It's going to look nuts because I'm going to do it for real, because at the camp they said I should do it for real. Like, I need to pretend this is the most important behavior of my life." And so I got in behind her. Here we go, down the hall. My wife jumps in. Our 2-year-old jumps in. I'm thinking, great, now we're all nuts. This is great. So we're going, and just keep in mind, with the old therapy, it would take us 45 minutes to get what we called a green light, which is interaction between Ashlyn, which is what we wanted, right? So here I go, and Ashlyn, blah, 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 she gets to the door, bing, she looks back like we're from outer space. And for the first time since she'd been diagnosed, she sits down on the floor and plays with us for an hour. See, care is not a special line. It's not a straight line between A and B. It's not something that's easily done, and it requires risk. But I want you to realize, and I want you to know today, that empowerment, if you can be empowered, an empowered patient, empowered caregiver, leads to better care. And that better care is not invented out in the internet. It's invented right here. It's invented right where you're sitting, and it's not a straight line. It looks like this. You might not intend to cross a bridge or build a bridge like this picture looks, but that's how it is. And I want you to know today that I believe in you and to keep on keeping on, and let's create better care together. Thank you very much.